Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday meeting. And let's call on Mike Bird.
Thank you, everybody. If I can talk to right distance from the microphone, let's try the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I brought that four-way test since I don't have it really memorized, even though I got this in 1992 when I joined. Let's try the four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mike. And for the thought of the day, Tommy Drake. Never know.
Okay, this inspiration is from a poem by Robert Frost that I have always been attached to. I even did a piece of art about it. Anyway, it's The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. That's a wonderful poem. Do we have any guests we'd like to introduce? No? Okay. Visiting Rotarians, I know we have a guest speaker. We'll do that later, though. Okay. How about just a few announcements? We had a board meeting last night, and one of the things that Steve Rowe reminded us that we were going to bring back the 50-50 raffle. Oh, John, I didn't consider him visiting. Forgot he was visiting. At any rate, so we're reinstituting the 50-50 raffle, and for those of you not sure how that works, we have a deck of cards in the back. We sell each card for $1. At the end, during Sergeant of Arms, we pull a card, and the winner splits the pot. So if we sell 52 cards, you get $26, and the other 26 comes to the club. So I see a few more cards. Maybe Leonora, maybe you can walk around and try to hawk a few extra cards if you wouldn't mind. One more thing, someone left their Rotarian of the Month pin here. I know if this belongs, we think it's from this club. Oh, I'm getting a kiss. So it must be. Oh, she's throwing a kiss, not to me, but sorry, I'm jealous. Anyway, and I just want to notice, one of the focuses of a newer one of Rotary is environmental focus. I mentioned before, I'm involved in this group called the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. And the second Wednesday of each month, we have a work party at a property in Jackson County. It's called the Rogue River Preserve. It's right on the river. If you think you're not doing work in Josephine County, well, it's the same river where we get our drinking water. So it all, sooner or later, it all relates. Anyway, it's just a little heads up. I'm going to start putting some information maybe in the Navigator. I'd like to get a work party together, maybe one or two in the fall and then one in the spring. We'll see how it goes. I know a lot of it's weather and air quality dependent, but anyway, I'd like to start hitting that environmental focus a little bit. Okay, do we have any announcements to make? All right.
First off, a polio update, as of the, August 18th, this year, there has been 7 cases total, 5 in Afghanistan and 2 in, Pakistan. The last case was in Afghanistan back in July of this year. So only 7 so far. We're doing great. But the other announcement is that, need you mark your calendars for, October 22nd. We're going to have a district, southern part of the district anyway, foundation celebration. It's going to be a barbecue. It's going to be at the Henley Farms over near Jacksonville, from 2 to 6. More will come later. We're just getting planning out, finalizing that now. So we'll have some good fellowship there with the band for some different background music or maybe some dancing later on. So mark your calendars for October 22nd. Thank you.
So the end of the month fellowship will be at STEAM. Okay, so I have a sign-up sheet because we kind of have limited spaces there. I'm gonna, I've reserved 3 tables, but I have to get there at 4:30. So if anybody wants to join me, I'll buy them a drink at 4:30. But it's, wait a minute, wait. That was a dumb thing. Okay, so it's officially at 5. So, anyway, it's right next to Climate City and it's a great place. So I've just, so see you there.
Patty, thank you for taking that on. Okay, Doug. Okay, mural update. We got our permits issued from the city. That's it. That's all I got. All right. One card. Thank you. Good job, Leah and Nora. Now she's gonna win. And you have to count $26 out. Did you miss that? Okay, any other announcements? I think we are ready for our program, and I believe we have the city attorney here who will be introduced by Valerie.
I am very honored to introduce to you Augustus Ogu, who is our current city attorney. He is born and raised in Denver, Colorado, where I was born as well, and he graduated in 2017 from Lewis and Clark College. He worked for Josephine County 4 years as assistant legal counsel under Wally Hicks. He's been our city attorney for 1.5 years and has led us through many difficult times very graciously. And I can't tell you how much he does his research, and he goes out in the community to make sure what he's doing is the right thing to do. So like I said, I'm very honored to invite him here. He is married to his wife, Kerry, for 2 years, and he has a beautiful little 6-month-old daughter named Aurora. And of course, we appreciate that. He coaches boys varsity soccer at Illinois Valley High School, and he was recently appointed to the board of the 4-Way Community Foundation to start in January 2024. So great community member, young, and has great advice. I am going to hand out to each table a slide deck of what he's going to be presenting, so you can kind of follow along. He's used to doing that for us as city council, and we appreciate that. So without further ado, here's Augustus Ogu.
Thank you, Councilor Lovelace, for that introduction. I'm sorry that I didn't have an actual PowerPoint presentation. I didn't know, I've never been here before, did not know they had a TV and capabilities to do that. So my apologies to each of you, and I only printed out 12 slides because I didn't know how many people I was presenting to today. So I thought I'd start off with a small introduction about my role with the city. So when you think of a lawyer, you think of an individual who represents many clients. I represent one client, and that's the organization itself of the city. And the organization is made up and comprised of many moving parts, right? We have the city council, community development, finance, public works, human resources, and other departments that comprise the whole. So I'm a one-person department. I don't have a legal assistant. I don't have a paralegal. I do have a quarter-time assistant who is wonderful. My primary role is as legislative counsel and legal advisor to the city council. And I also provide legal advice to other city departments, boards, and commissions. I do a lot of contract drafting and review and contract management. When necessary, I represent the city in legal proceedings, typically in state court. And then for more complex litigation, I manage and coordinate with outside counsel to kind of keep abreast of what they're doing and how things are moving forward. And then I also assist in managing the public meetings. So when I was thinking about how I would put this together, I was wanting to move through the cases that led us to where we are now, right? So I'm going to start with the case out of Idaho. This is Martin v. Boise. This was a case where individuals who were homeless sued the city because they alleged that the city had a practice and policy of punishing them for sleeping and resting in involuntary acts, essentially. And the U.S. District Court sided with the homeless individual, saying that it was an Eighth Amendment violation that constituted cruel and unusual punishment for a city or municipality, for a city or a county or any government entity to punish individuals criminally for sleeping and resting in public when they had no place to go. And this created a really weird situation too, because you had Article 3 judges essentially dictating policy for cities. The formula that came out of that was, so long as you have more homeless individuals than shelter space in your city, then you will not be able to enforce your quality of life laws. Those are anti-camping in public, no sleeping in public or on streets, things of that nature. And so as soon as that case was decided, it was appealed to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit declined to hear it. And then it was appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ultimately decided to hear it. The Supreme Court ultimately decided not to hear it. And so that was established Ninth Circuit law at the time. Upon the resolution of Martin v. Boise, you saw a bunch of copycat lawsuits coming up, and one of them was Blake versus Grants Pass. And this case is still ongoing. So this was initiated in the U.S. District Court in Medford, basically under the same theory as Martin v. Boise, that Grants Pass had a practice and policy of punishing individuals for the involuntary acts of sleeping and resting. And so the U.S. District Court agreed. There was motions for summary judgment, and the U.S. District Court sided with the plaintiffs in this case, essentially saying that Grants Pass's quality of life laws, anti-camping, anti-sleeping laws, violated the Eighth Amendment. And it went into a lengthy analysis about how the city doesn't have low barrier shelters that would count as shelter space under their HUD designated definition. They noted how the Gospel Rescue Mission, although it had open seats, doesn't qualify as low barrier housing because the Gospel Rescue Mission has a set of rules and a set of religious tenets that are associated with their ministry, with their mission. The Sobering Center didn't count the emergency shelter at the time. I don't know that it existed. But the court went into an analysis about how none of that counted. The court also expanded on Martin v. Boise in two very important ways. First, it said that the Eighth Amendment could be applied to civil action, civil citation that would later result in a criminal action. That was one. And two, in addition to being able to sleep outside or sleep in public places, individuals must be afforded the rudimentary protections against the elements for them to, keep warm and dry. So that's where you see people sleeping with sleeping bags, other bedding, tents, tarps, and the like. So the city appealed that ruling to the Ninth Circuit, and the decision was upheld 2-1 by the Ninth Circuit. At that point, the city petitioned for a rehearing en banc with the Ninth Circuit. So that means that it would have been heard in front of a larger panel of judges. So when it's up on appeal the first time, it's heard before 3 judges. If an en banc hearing is approved, then it's heard by a panel of 10 judges plus the chief judge. And we waited for almost 8 months for a decision from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And they finally came back denying the city's hearing for en banc. Now, this is what happened here is there's 27 judges in the Ninth Circuit. So for those of you who don't know, the United States is separated into, I think, 12 districts across the country. And the Ninth Circuit is the largest, and it encompasses the biggest amount of land in the country. And so there's 26 judges, or 27 judges. The vote to rehear the case was lost by 1 vote. So it was 14 for, 13 against. And in all of those, in all 13 cases, all 13 judges wrote a dissent. That's extraordinary. That does not happen very often. And so based on those dissents, based on our belief that it's not good law in the Ninth Circuit and that it strips the municipalities from being able to coordinate and essentially regulate its private property or its the public property, the city had made the decision to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court, and that petition was filed just on Monday or Tuesday. So, as a result of the circuit court case, an injunction was put into place in the city. So most of you have heard of it. Essentially, it requires that the city keep its open spaces, its open parks available for sleeping and resting between certain hours throughout the year. And as we now know, that right to sleeping, right, it's essentially a right, the way that the court opinions have come out. But they have a right to sleep in every park except Reinhardt Volunteer Park. And so, and that's from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night to 7:30 in the morning. At the time, the injunction also had a 24-hour period where you had to give notice before you can enforce. And so state law changed recently. Actually, it went into effect this year, where cities have to have a policy for providing 72 hours notice before an established campsite can be removed. And so when our police are doing enforcement, they're looking at it in the scope of the injunction, and they're also looking at it in the view of what changes in state law have occurred. So the practical effects of the injunction have been really well felt, right? There's a proliferation of tents, in some cases, open drug use, open drinking, violating all sorts of park rules, killing the grass, destroying the sprinkler infrastructure and irrigation infrastructure. There's 2 CRT officers who handle the sleeping and resting aspect of camping. So they go to parks and they post tents that have been there, give them 72 hours. And then upon expiration of that 72 hours, they go in and remove them and give them a citation if they're still there. So the police post hundreds of campsites a week all over the city. The city has about 16 parks by my last count. And a lot of the time officers do get voluntary compliance. Now, there are a lot of individuals who are truly out there and have real issues, right? I think that you can distill the homeless population to about 4 discrete groups. You have individuals who were one bad bill away from losing everything, and they've lost everything. They can't make their house payments. They have jobs, but they have no place to stay. There's people who are down hard out and on their luck, right? And then you have individuals who have mental illnesses, undiagnosed mental illnesses, who are unable to hold serious jobs for long periods of time, and that inconsistency of income leads it basically enhances homelessness. Third, you have individuals who have substance abuse issues, who aren't getting the help that they need, so they can't hold down stable jobs. And then 4, you have people who are termed as vagrants, people who, for some reason or another, choose to live outside. These are the 4 groups that I think we can distill it down into. There are a lot of people that do voluntarily comply with the police as they're trying to go out and enforce these ordinances, which I'll get into a second. But the injunction is really limited how the city can go into its public places and enforce kind of on a blanket level. It's one of those things that sometimes the police are calling me saying, hey, can we do this at this point in time? What if we try to do this? And so it's there's a lot of moving parts to it, and we're trying our best to make sure that they have the information that they need, so they're not going out there and trying to guess, because that's the last thing we want our officers to have to do. We want them to be able to go out there, see something, and then know how to enforce it. And so as a result of the issues that were going on in the park, it was identified that there were a number of ordinances or a number of codes, that were outdated or non-existent that are prevalent in other cities. So in June, the city updated its nuisance codes, and it was less of a set of amendments more than it was of just kind of bringing it into the 20th century, 21st century, because, I say that tongue in cheek, but at the same time, I think that when our municipal code was drafted, there was absolutely no way to foresee that we would have the sort of homeless issue that we have that's so prevalent today. So, but it was something that was long overdue. We added provisions that more clearly defined, disorderly conduct, not having drug paraphernalia or drugs in the park, using drugs in the park, public drinking, defecation, urination, control of animals, offensive littering, and scattering other rubbish. And it sounds almost silly that it wasn't there, but again, everything has just kind of been pushed to the point where the police needed more tools for them to go out and enforce, look at conduct, less at sleeping and resting, and going more after conduct that's attendant with homeless encampments. And so another thing that this set of ordinances did is that it created buffer zones from certain park amenities. So it created 20-foot buffers from ball fields, courts, restrooms, porta potties or other bathrooms or other city infrastructure that sat in a park. And it created 50-foot buffers from playgrounds, splash pads, and any waterways adjacent to any parks. So that has helped tremendously. As you've probably seen in Riverside Park, east of the Caveman Bridge, there aren't any portable structures there anymore. They're not allowed to be there. So that's the only park where portable structures are not permitted. So the city council has been trying to kind of coalesce around a way to fix these issues. And what I've listed here isn't necessarily saying city council is going to do these things, right? It's things that we've discussed and we've kind of assessed our options. And that's an urban campground, so a place where people can go. It's a plot of land and it's separated so that they can each have their tents or whatever they need to keep themselves protected from the elements. And it's organized and managed by a third party. Temporary or long-term shelter space, navigation center, which is a resource that directs individuals to whatever resources they may need, whether that's employment, whether that's case management, whether that's looking for a job, things of that nature. And finally, the city initiated a safe parking site ordinance that allows for private businesses, should they choose, to dedicate 3 or up to 6 parking spots at their businesses for transitional overnight camping. So the challenges to these solutions always go back to generating ongoing funding. So initially, the city had received some money from the state, and we have received some money from the federal government through ARPA. But it seemed that at every turn to try to get something going, something went wrong. And it wasn't really through the fault of the council or the mayor, but it was just not really a good set of circumstances. Another issue is finding suitable property. And then finally, there's an issue of the city not wanting to be involved in the operations. And I'll get into why in my next slide. So in the law, there's a concept that's known as the state created danger. And that kind of derives from the 14th Amendment that essentially it states that the government can't deprive anybody of life, property without due process of law. And there's procedural due process, and then there's substantive due process. So substantive due process is kind of like, well, you have procedural due process that says, this is the procedure you need to follow in order for somebody to be heard. And then you have substantive due process, which is not really anywhere in the Constitution, but the idea is that the constitutional amendments have other meanings within them that talk about fairness, that basically promote certain outcomes. And so one of those principles is that you don't place somebody in a worse position than they were in before, right? So the state created danger itself is a concept under a broader umbrella of like constitutional tort law. And it deals with suits against the government that allege that the government put an individual in a worse position than they were in before. So it states essentially that if a government, and in this context, we're talking about homelessness, if a government affirmatively said to a homeless individual, there's this camp that the city is running, you need to go there, you can't be in the park, and it's low barrier enough, and the city were to send somebody to that park, and then they were attacked by somebody else because the city wasn't vetting who was going to that camping location, then the city could potentially be on the hook for liability. And so there's generally 4 elements. So there has to be an affirmative conduct. So that means the city has to affirmatively do something to put somebody in a worse position. There has to be a foreseeable harm so that it's likely they knew or should have known that their actions would have put that person in danger. There has to be a substantial relationship between the government and the victim, and there has to be deliberate indifference to their safety. So I bring this up because there are a lot of questions as to why the city doesn't want to run a navigation center or a shelter or an urban campground. And a lot of it has to do with some of these settled concepts that we're already kind of in a really unique legal landscape from the rest of the state, because we're under the specter of this injunction and we're getting ready to engage in Supreme Court litigation over this case. And so one, we're not really wanting to ruin our case because a lot of work and time has gone into us getting there. Just kind of as a side note, the law firm that is representing our insurance company is doing this case for a flat fee of $5,000. This is a law firm that charges $1,200 per hour for their partners. So the astronomical value that the city has been getting, it's really unmatched. These people are they're true believers, right? So $5,000 flat fee. So we obviously don't want to do anything to ruin the case, right? And then my job as city attorney is also as a risk manager, risk assessor. And so while in concept, a shelter is not something that the city would want to run, that doesn't necessarily mean that the city wouldn't want to see it. I think that, and I'm talking about me now, I think that a shelter, at least under the current guidelines and the current opinions, could help to a point in alleviating a little tiny bit of pressure from the parks. But the issue is the sheer amount of homeless people, as low as 50 or as many as 600. There's not any real way for us to know. And so, it would be a draw on city resources to put a city department in charge of, coordinating a location, vetting people, making sure that they don't have a criminal history or that they could be a danger to themselves or others. There's a lot of things that go into creating shelter space that the city should not be involved in, just from a liability perspective. All of that said, I think that I think I'd be correct in saying if a bunch of money fell out of the sky tomorrow for the city council and the mayor to do a shelter and they could sustain it, it probably would be done. 4 corners, a roof, and a bed to try to help the situation in the parks. But of course, there's just practical realities that get in the way, and it's one of those things that we're still trying to figure out a solution to. And anyway, it's a tough topic for everybody. I know that the citizens are very upset, and it's one of those things, again, that we kind of just have to take day by day. In terms of the Supreme Court ruling, we're hoping that they will decide whether or not to take up the case at the end of this year. And if they do take up the case, we should get a decision by next June. So that's all I had, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. Gosh, I'm sweating.
So why is Reinhardt Volunteer Park not included in the parks that people can camp in?
I'll let you answer.
I think,
I wasn't here at the time.
yeah, when the injunction was drawn up, it's because it has most sports facilities. So because it had the most of the sporting facilities to protect the kids. And so that's why that one was laid out.
First of all, thank you for coming. It was fascinating. Aside from possible action by the Supreme Court, is there a legal way out of this thing? In other words, if we don't have enough low barrier housing or beds or spaces, is there some quantitative, some criterion? Like once we get to 500, we're there and legally we're off the hook. So I don't understand how we will ever get out of this legal morass.
So I'm not sure that the court knows. Oh, for Zoom, yeah. So I'm not sure that the court even knows the answer to that question, because as it is with judges, their decisions have a real life practical impact. There's theoretical impact that kind of happens on the pages of an opinion, and then there's the real life aspect. So the way that Martin v. Boise was first interpreted, it created a formula that said, so long as you have more individuals on the street than shelter beds, then you can't do any sort of enforcement for sleeping in public. So think about Boise, Ada County. I don't know how many people live there, but Boise itself is at least 300,000 people living there, at least. So if you think about the proportions, there's tens of thousands of homeless people. Essentially, it would have meant that they would have needed tens of thousands of shelter spaces. Now, the point in time count that was done in Grants Pass for the U.S. Circuit Court decision, there was a 602 person unhoused count. So you would think that if we had a shelter for 603, then at that point you could enforce for sleeping and resting. Now, the Ninth Circuit has clarified exactly what it would mean, right? So I'm just going to use Grants Pass. If Grants Pass builds, say Grants Pass has, just for the sake of argument, 600 homeless people, and then Grants Pass magically built a shelter that accommodates 200. And out of those 200, 150 of those beds are filled. The city, at least based on what the court has said, the police would be able to enforce against individuals sleeping and resting in the park because there are 50 open shelter beds. So if they enforce against 50 people and they all choose to go to the shelter, then they don't get a citation or anything. But say if anybody said, no, I don't want to go, at that point that they can be cited and enforced against. But then you run into the issue again when there's no shelter beds available, right? So you have 600 homeless, 200 full beds. At that point, people have no choice but to sleep outside. That's the clarification that the court has made in terms of the number of open shelter beds to the number of people who are homeless. Yes.
Just wanted to add to that. That was a clarification that just came up in the very last one. And just to know, and this is, I think, an important piece of this, is that when we did the on-comp, we had the opportunity to have other cities and communities right on our side, just as they did on the other side. And we did get the Seattles and the Los Angeles, San Francisco. I mean, they're all standing behind us saying, please, this needs to be clarified in the Supreme Court for that very reason, because they had evidence, especially in Seattle. They had lots of beds, but people were choosing not to go to the beds. And so that was part of the problem. They had like 1,200 beds, and yet they couldn't do anything because people were choosing not to. So they did say that, they did make that, but then as you can see with numbers, it gets really foggy through all of it.
The critics of park use are complaining that they find needles everywhere. I just wonder what the facts are. That's what I see in the letters to the editor, et cetera. Do you have any facts about that?
Yes, I can speak to that. So, just earlier this summer, the county did a walkthrough of 4 parks. They walked through Baker, Riverside, Tussing, and Morrison Park. And they actually wrote the city a letter detailing what they thought our biggest priorities were in terms of keeping the park facilities clean and safe. Their biggest priorities were open flames and fires, needles to a degree, and then areas for people to use the restroom so they aren't publicly defecating and urinating. There have been instances where needles have been found out in the parks and out, in the bathrooms in some of these parks. The issue is pervasive enough that it needed to be addressed. However, it's not rampant like you would see in a city like Portland. I've been to Portland recently. I went to law school there for 3 years, and I lived there from 2008 to 2012 for college. That city is this close to becoming a failed city. It's very close. And you walk down the street, you see needles everywhere, right? That isn't happening here. I'm not saying that it's not an issue, and it is happening to a degree, but some of the measures that the city has taken in terms of changing its ordinances and disallowing drug paraphernalia in the parks has helped. Another thing that the county suggested that we do is to have more sharps containers for collection and in most of our bathrooms. So we don't do that in porta potties because those routinely get destroyed. But there are some needle collection, like sharps containers in some of the bathrooms in the parks. So the short answer is it does happen, and it is happening, but not to the degree that you're probably seeing on social media.
And our new Portland loos all have shrub containers in them.
The housing authority was just, the governor was just down here thanking the housing authority. Are these programs, are they helping in any way? Are they just considering the low income, or does it help you? You know, I know there's other projects, but how's that affect the overall situation?
So as everybody in this room knows, Grants Pass has a real bad housing problem. Not enough of it and not enough affordable housing. The median income is not enough typically to buy a single family home. Some people's rent is more than my mortgage, which is crazy. So in terms of like the affordable development housing projects that the Jackson Housing Council and Josephine Housing Council are doing are tremendous help, because they lessen the possibility that people will end up on the streets, that people and families will end up on the streets. Again, the ever pervasive issue is ongoing funding, right? The state only has so much money to go around. And like it or not, politics in Salem tends to pick favorites that favor the northern part of the state. And so, good example, Josephine County was left out of funding for homeless programs that was signed by the governor in January. It was a lot of money that the county was left out on. And then we had a chance to get it. We all know the story. The county declined to declare an emergency, and we couldn't get a share of that cash. Well, there's, I think, another share of 27 million that's coming down for the rest of the rural counties that weren't included in the emergency declaration. And I think that that's going to be going towards shelter space. It's going to be going towards infrastructure and operations. The issue tends to be cost. But then again, you look at other cities like San Francisco and LA, they've thrown millions and millions and millions of dollars at this issue, and it's gotten worse. So I think that politically, there's a robust conversation about what should you be treating? Should you be putting people into housing first, or should you be treating underlying conditions? And I don't have the answer to that question. But providing affordable housing for people who are on the cusp or on the edge of being homeless, I think that does help.
I was just going to add to that of the 27 million, I think 21 million of it went and was dispersed by a formula, and it went all over the counties. And that formula was to provide housing, stable housing. Each county had to say that they would stabilize 100 families in their community. Of that 27, there's 6 million left. And the city of Grants Pass did put together, in conjunction with UCAN and some of the local nonprofits, a proposal to the governor asking that they would give us a chunk of that to help us do with the navigation center. And we haven't heard anything as a result of that, but that's like 6 million of all of the counties. So we're not talking much money at all. And it all does come down to money. It all comes down to funding, because as most of you know, I'm a rally public safety. You know, we can't even right now, we only have 2 CRTs, which is a critical response team that goes up, and they're not 7 days a week. So, you know, we are low on just officers to enforce the new rules that we have. And without some other revenue source, that's not going to change. And that's part of our problems with enforcement.
There are a few groups that are trying to help, and I understand a lot of the homeless are elderly women. And MINT, I've forgotten what the M is for, Integrated Navigation Plan, has doctors and nurses and other health people who are trying to help people, particularly with SORS, with diabetes, other medical problems. And the original plan that you came up with was to any group that was helping the homeless would have to pay $250 every 3 months, I believe, and have $1 million insurance plan. And these are people who are doing it. out of the goodness of their heart, a lot of it, 1 day a week, but they cover all the parks. And so the laws were not going to be good. When we had the meeting that you that was very good about all of this, there was going to be a workshop or something to address these and change them. How is that coming?
I can tell you, I think it's September. Yeah, September 18th is when we were having that meeting. So it has been put on the agenda.
Okay. So part of my role as a city attorney is legislative counsel for the city council. I don't really have too much control over agenda items. I was expected that evening to come up with a work product at the behest of enough counselors. Enough counselors were interested in it. And so that was the work product that I came up with. And counselors actually wanted it sooner than that. They wanted it on the same night that we did the nuisance ordinance changes. And I told them I couldn't deliver it by then. So what the original plan was, and it's probably going to be scrapped. I don't want to get out in front of council, but there's probably going to be there has to be some sort of change to it, because the original plan was to provide for a $250 refundable deposit for any events that they're having. And it isn't necessarily like making them do it every 3 months. They pay the $250 and then they could have as many events as they wanted in the 3 months. And then if the city had to use any money against that deposit, then they'd have to replenish it. So they'd only have to replenish it if it got used at all. And it was going to be like a $25 permit fee just for administrative time. I've had a chance to go out with Mint in the Parks. I went out with them, I want to say about a month or so ago, and I watched firsthand what they do. I saw them, they do case management, they do hands-on medical care, like you said. Somebody was getting stitches removed, getting food to take your diabetic medicine, things of that nature. I have to think about things I think about things as a city attorney, and then I think about things as a citizen. And things that I think about as a citizen, I tend to keep close to my vest, because you're not supposed to know my political proclivities, right? I am an agent for the city council, and whether left or right does not matter. If they want something, my job is to try to deliver it. So that's probably as far as I'll get into, is in so far as a defense of what I did. I don't make policy. I drive policy. Council will make the policy, and I'll try to drive it in a way that works for them and that's legal. So I think does that answer your question? Of course.
And once again, I mean, that's why we put it on as a workshop, so where we could have those people come and talk to us and talk through it. So as of now, nothing has been said, and I appreciate Augustus going out and looking at the situation, going to the parks and getting the whole picture. And I think that's one of the reasons that I do appreciate him, is that he's done that. I think we have one question, a favorite, just because I work with Kelly. I know, favorite. She's my sponsor. What can I say?
So I'm just asking for clarification here. So because we've got this business going on about a recall, what exactly is the mayor's piece in these decisions? So thank you.
I think pretty much we know that it's not the mayor's policy, is set by the council.
Okay, so the charter reads that unless stated elsewhere in the charter, all legislative authority is vested in the city council. The mayor has two enumerated powers, I believe. The first one is the right to veto any piece of legislation or resolution, and the other is to break ties. So those are the only two. I off the top of my head, I think those are the only two enumerated roles that the mayor has. Otherwise, the mayor, she gets to ask questions. She gets to, gather information, but she's the head of the government. I was just gonna say something else. That's really it. The mayor, she, as the political leader, right? She has the bully pulpit, which is something that she can use. And but as far as enumerated powers go, break ties and veto. You can answer that question. I'm not gonna.
No, she can give us our parks back. I think we're well aware of that. She does have agenda setting and she does run the meeting, which I think she does really well. But that is her role, is to run the meetings and keep us in check. So yeah, and I think most of us know she has no ruling over the parks. Well, thank you, Augustus. I can't appreciate the different enough.
Well, thank you. I found it fascinating, and I certainly know more than I did before that. Let's see, John, Sergeant at Arms. Don't forget the card. Cards. Forget the what? Oh, pick a card. I get to pick the card? Let's see, what is my card? My card is a 10 of clubs. No, I bought a 10 of, should I have put it in there? Is that the? Okay, nine hearts. Oh, well, right. All right, you guys have my money already. Instead of the normal happy bucks, I would like to ask you to think about what phrase or statement helps guide you through the day and through your life. My office, those few of you that have been in my office, I've got several different things up on the wall, not only to remind me of what to do and what's important, but also to remind my visitors what. So what can you say back there?
Here it is. I actually had two things come to me this last week that I think are going to be on my wall soon. Number one is you don't have to be perfect to be successful. So that gives us hope. And the other one is if you want to doubt something, doubt your limits. So those are going to be my two new, as I go into this journey into aging, which is probably the hardest journey any of us have to make.
To follow up on that aging, changing, this has been a guide for me for decades. Each stage of experience brings us new views of divine goodness and love.
One of my personal favorites is life is not about waiting for the storms to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain.
Hey, dancing in the rain.
Judy Davidson told me this a long time ago. And I try to remember it. That's not my dog to walk.
All right, this is from my mom. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean.
I like. That's great. Oh, over here.
I'm hearing this in a lot of our schools. Kindness in all things. And I think that really answers our third and fourth rules for the Rotary. Kindness.
Is don't sweat the small stuff.
government's last.
Work like a captain and play like a pirate.
Any others?
Give the world the best that you can and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best that you can anyway.
Well, this actually has little to do with the government, but maybe everything to do with the government, but this is as a mother and a person. This too shall pass.
Well, oh, here's another.
I think I got this when I was up at Pets and I really liked it. And it was humankind, be both. And it took me a minute to figure that out. And I was like, oh, human and kind. Okay, but I love that saying.
Any others? And I've got one that I learned, most of you know that I identify with my Italian heritage on my mother's side, right? And something I learned from my grandmother that affects me very powerfully. I was a kid in the kitchen. She never spoke English, by the way. And if you went out on the street with something to eat, the other kids would want a bite of it. And I wanted to finish what I had. My nana said to me, if you have food, you share it. And that still impacts my life. But growing up in Little Italy, Des Moines, Iowa, Graziano's sausage is the best Italian sausage anywhere. And how many have been to Des Moines? Have you been to Graziano's on the south side? You missed out. Yeah, and here's something. Get the camera around on my back. Okay, Graziano sausage since 1912. And I bought the shirt. You can read what it says. You read it. This speaks to the coarse humor that we Italians have, and I think Johnny Schiavone understands that very well, right? In case you couldn't, at the back, could you read it at the back? Okay, good. Then I don't have to say it again.
Thank you. The one and only John Jones.
Thank you. Happy Bucks, the standard old fashioned, I'm happy and I'm going to make a donation.
I've got 5 happy bucks in honor of Holly Leidy, who some of you know is moving to South Carolina. I've known Holly for many years. She's a friend of my daughter's. And I also took her on one of my first Europe trips for the college, study abroad trips. I could tell you many stories about Holly on that trip, but I won't. I'll just say that one of them was that she was noted for being able to fall asleep at a moment's notice in anything that was moving. So the bus trip, anything, her parents must have been very excited about having her as a child, and she would go to sleep immediately on road trips. But we used to kid about how we had to make sure that Holly had a room within the first 3 floors so she wouldn't go to sleep on the elevator going up. So anyway, Holly, I'm really going to miss you. Great luck in South Carolina.
More happy bucks?
Well, I have 26 happy bucks, it turns out, because that was kind of fun having the card game back and to get kind of lucky and win that on the first time. So
thank you.
Yeah, I've got 4 happy bucks. I've got about 4 gallons of blackberries that have been picked and preserved, and I really like blackberries. It's been a great blackberry season, and I wish I could claim to be a great gardener because of all the blackberries I grow, but they seem to grow everywhere in everybody's yard. I don't know what the issue is, but yeah.
You need to make blackberry wine.
Just ask Mr. Sausage. 5 happy bucks for Holly too. She's very special. She grew up with my son Josh, and I actually have a funny prom picture of her that I could share. So I am really gonna miss you. And then the other thing is, Augustus, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And thank you for being a new foundation. That was God.
Yeah. You're vibrating.
Well, I'm happy during the extreme hot week. I happened to be in northern Washington on a salmon fishing trip, and well, I think we caught at least 20 wild fish for every one fish that we could keep. Our arms literally got tired, and the last day we said, we're done. But and my husband's been salmon fishing all his life, and he says he's never caught that many salmon.
Any more happy bucks? Giovanni.
Thank you, Python. I have $5. I'm still on the Asante Foundation Board. I just want to bring this up. Our new hospital is going to be open in January, February, the new Asante Rogue Valley Medical Center. The nice, really important thing is the women's hospital and the children's hospital are, the women's hospital's above the children's hospital. They're up on the 6th floor. They got the view. I don't know where the hell the men are ever at in any hospital, but they got out the view. But I would like to say that in the NICU, when a child is born and has complications, our hospital, there will be the first in the nation that when the child has complications, the mother and the child will go in a room and could be there a month or 2, but they'll have their own room, but a bathroom and everything. So that's fantastic, really is.
Yes.
My Samurai Sprouts classes, Aikido for 4 and 5-year-olds at our wonderful Growing Together Center is starting up again in September. So if you know any 4 or 5-year-olds, please come see me, and I've got some flyers. Thank you. Happy bucks.
All right. Well, we had some discussion today about what's going on with the city and some of your inspiration and some happiness. Good.
All right. Thank you, Don. Once again, another great meeting, and thank you again for taking time out of your day. That was wonderful. Judy lent me a book called Just Mercy, and I just began it. And I can see it's going to be a heavy read, but anyway, I would like to read you a quotation, thought for the day. The author is named Brian Stevenson. And what he says is that my work with the poor and the incarcerated has persuaded me that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. Thank you.
Bye-bye.